Buonasera, everyone. I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Now, this blog is gonna be, well, a tad tricky for me to put together, but let's talk about two subjects. Let's start off by talking about Hemdale Pictures. Now, it's been quite a long time since I talked about them when I blogged The Princess and the Goblin and Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland. But still, I think most of their films, including Savage Land, are pretty underrated. And it is sad that Hemdale is no longer in business as of 1995. Our second subject is an Italian navigator from the 1400s named Christopher Columbus. For those who haven't brushed up on this guy in history class, let me tell you a little bit of info on him. Christopher Columbus was known for completing 4 voyages across the Atlantic Ocean under, well, the auspices of the Catholic monarchs of Spain. He led the first European expeditions to the Caribbean, Central America, and South America, initiating the permanent European colonization of the Americas. Columbus discovered the viable sailing route to the Americas, a continent which was not yet, well, known to the old world back then. While what he thought he had discovered was a route to the Far East, he is credited with the opening of the Americas for conquest and settlement by Europeans. So, what do Hemdale and Christopher Columbus have in common? Well, during the early 90s, Hemdale did distribute a German animated fantasy film, which happens to involve the famous explorer. So, released in Germany on April 9th, 1992, and in North America on December 3rd, 1993, the movie is The Magic Voyage. So, let's set sail. Christopher Columbus decides to go on a journey to prove that the Earth is not flat. Shortly, he meets a little woodworm named Pico, who gnaws his cube out of the world into a round globe, giving him the first of many ideas. While Columbus obtains financing for his voyage from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, Pico falls in love with the Firefly Princess Marilyn, who is the prisoner of an evil but unexplained swarm of bugs, which take her west. Pico and Columbus later set sail on the Santa Maria to save Marilyn. But there are many obstacles in Columbus's way, besides a crew so afraid of sailing off the edge that they're willing to commit mutiny, and a set of troublemaking rats. So, what do I personally think of the movie? Well, I understand that many of you out there don't like this movie, but the truth is, this movie is actually one of my childhood favorites, and of course, it made it to number 2 on my top 13 bad films that I like. But, let me explain why in my Mustang notes. Now, this movie was produced and directed by Michael Shulman, who would later direct Millionaire Dogs and Little Big Panda. Now, believe it or not, this movie's release date was the year when America celebrated the 500th anniversary of the famous voyage of Christopher Columbus. Other films that were released during this time of the year included 1492, Conquest of Paradise, Carry On Columbus, and Christopher Columbus, The Discovery. At the time, the film was the most expensive animated production in Germany, costing about $14.5 million. During the film's release in German theaters, director Showman stated that the film was intended to be a film about the discovery of America from a more, satirical view in order to differentiate ourselves clearly from the lofty views of history, so we can present Columbus as a lovable, charming, and befuddled scholar. Phil Niblink, best known for directing An American Tail, Fievel Goes West, and We're Back, A Dinosaur Story with Simon Wells, and for working on films like The Fox and the Hound, The Iron Giant, the 1995 Casper movie, Oliver and Company, The Great Mouse Detective, and The Black Cauldron, was the animation director for the Magic Voyage. While American animators Stanley Green, Kevin Richardson, Rick Morrison, and George Singer assisted the animation department. Production lasted for 3 years. Also, aside from Hemdale, there's another English dub that was done by Atlas, which I'm not too familiar with due to how rare it is, but it can be obtained through Malayasan VCD releases distributed by Bergea HVN SDN BHD. Weird, huh? Plus, the US dub was written by David T. Riley and visual effects supervisor Scott Santoro. Now, let me remind you guys that I am aware of the numerous flaws this movie contains, like the historical inaccuracies, several animation goofs, and the abundance of ad-libbing. But still, my feelings for this movie hasn't changed ever since my mom bought this movie for me during my kindercare age. Also, to me, despite the goofs and errors, the animation it's okay. Though there are a few paint blobs at times, and the character animation is a tad stiff and slow at times. But there are a few other flaws that I've noticed, like Columbus's crew consisting of 3 to 5 men, plus the Nina and Pinta seem to disappear from the movie after a storm. However, there are a few scenes that I did enjoy in the movie, like the scene where Pico was playing around on a chandelier, the scene where Pico makes the inside of Columbus's globe look homey, and I did like the final climax where Pico and Columbus battle the Swarm Lord. Plus, I do like Pico and Columbus's dream sequences, even if Columbus's dream had some innuendo involving a telescope. And I think Pico's dream is pretty romantic. As for the story, well, it was okay. Yes, I did say it's mostly historical inaccurate, but just recently I've kind of figured that it is a tad similar to Disney's Ben and Me. Also, there is a fantasy theme in this movie too, which I don't really mind. Plus, the voyage is a tad rushed. Normally, it would take about several days to reach the New World from Spain, but in this movie, it seems to have taken about 2 days and 1 morning. Now let's move on to the songs in the movie. Now the first song in the film is called Pico the Adventurer, where we are introduced to our main character. To me, this song is not really the best. Yes, it is a tad annoying, but it is pretty laughable. And it's a bit too short, due to Pico being chased by a seagull named Mortimer. Next is A Fellow Like You, sung by Pico and Columbus. To me, this song is nice and relaxing, but still not great. But it does bring up a nice, wonderful feeling involving friendship. Also, during the song, an apple pie seller, her apprentice, and Columbus's horse joins in. Next we have The Life of the Sea, mainly sung by Columbus, in order to liven things up while his crew plans to mutiny him. To me, this is my favorite song in the movie. You see, it feels like the kind of song that everyone would sing while on a high-sea adventure. What I like about this song is that during the song's verses, Columbus talks about other leaders from other time periods, like the Ulysses, the Romans, and the Vikings. However, the ending verse did kind of ruin it, but it was pretty funny. And finally, we come to Heaven Is, sung during the end credits by the late Al Jarreau. To me, this is my second favorite song in the movie, mostly due to the instruments, plus the lyrics feel very relaxing. And now let's move on to the voice actors who brought each character to life. Also, as a reminder, we'll only go over the Hemdale dub. Christopher Columbus is voiced by the late, great Dom DeLuise. Best known from several Don Bluth films, like The Secret of NIMH, An American Tail, and All Dogs Go to Heaven. Now, to be honest, I kind of like this version of Columbus. Yeah, he is a bit of a bumbler compared to how he was according to history. He was a bit of a tyrant back then. But I still like that Columbus is an adventurer and an explorer. Though, it is kind of strange that Columbus thought that the Earth was a cube at first, until Pico drilled and chewed up the corners. As for Dom DeLuise as Columbus, well, I do understand that he is an Italian descent, but I feel like he's trying a bit too hard to pull off an Italian accent. Our main character, Pico the Woodworm, is voiced by Corey Feldman, who got to be in The Fox and the Hound, The Scarecrow, The Goonies, 2 of the Friday the 13th films, and the 1990s Ninja Turtles movie. In my opinion, even if he can be a little annoying, Pico is an okay character. But on the bright side, Pico is brave, crafty, a little sneaky at times, and he's very smart, due to him reading a lot of libraries. Next up we have Pico's love interest, Marilyn the Firefly Princess, voiced by 80s pop singer Irene Cara. Best known for singing What a Feeling from Flashdance, and she got to voice Snow White in Happily Ever After, and she voiced Leonette from Golden Films' The Jungle King. Now, Marilyn is the princess of a faraway kingdom called Moon Sprites, until the evil Swarm Lord took her away from her home and kept her as his prisoner. To me, while we don't see her too much throughout the movie, I think Marilyn is very pretty, and she is a tad frightened at first until she met Pico. Plus, she is very protective of her powers, since she did mention that it will never work in the wrong hands. Next are King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, voiced by Samantha Eager and the late Dan Haggerty. To me, Isabella is a likable character, and she's like a motherly figure to all the people of Spain. But she is a tad flirty due to her being smitten with Columbus. Though I think it was pretty sweet that Isabella gave him one of her earrings for luck. Her husband Ferdinand, on the other hand, is a hot-tempered douchebag. For example, he makes Leonardo da Vinci test out his flying invention too early, and he gets outraged by Columbus's theory. However, later on in the movie, he does agree to finance Columbus's voyage, but he warns him that if Columbus comes back empty-handed, he will be executed. Also, in case you're wondering about his advisor, Diego, well, even though he looks very sinister, he's not a major threat in this movie. Next we have Mortimer, a seagull voiced by James Knapp. Now, this character was kind of an antagonist to Pico due to him trying to eat the little woodworm. But thankfully, Pico manages to drill his way out of his beak twice. But while he spends time on the Santa Maria, he accepts Pico as a friend. Heck, he even helps Pico escape the collapsing temple nearing the end of the movie. Next we come to three hungry and irritated rats, named Rizzo, Julius, and Gutter, voiced by Brett Baxter Clark, James Knapp, and Ted Pryor. These guys are a tad grumpy, and they do antagonize Pico a couple times throughout the movie. However, sadly, one of them gets killed after the Swarm Lord attacks the Santa Maria. So, the remaining rats become supporting characters in order to avenge their fallen friend. Our last supporting character is Bob the Beaver, voiced by Leonard Carson. Even though his dam got smashed by the Santa Maria by accident, Bob becomes a friend and ally to Pico. And I really like that he gave Pico a piece of wood to munch on. And he leads his new friends through the jungle to reach the Swarm Lord's lair. Last but not least, we come to the main villain himself, the Swarm Lord, also voiced by Dan Haggerty. To me, his voice and personality is a tad similar to King Ferdinand, kind of like Captain Hook and George Darling from Peter Pan, or several of the Oz characters and their Kansas counterparts. Anyway, as mentioned earlier, this, swarm of dangerous bugs, either locusts or bees, I'm not sure, but anyway, he kidnapped Marilyn from her home so that he can learn how to use the Moon Sprite magic to become invincible. After Pico found her in prison in a chandelier, the Swarm Lord took Marilyn to his lair in the New World, which is an Aztec temple. To me, the Swarm Lord is a very threatening and intimidating villain. For example, he can alter his appearance to many different forms, like a wizard, a demon, a bull, a spider, a bee, a sword, a dragon, a serpent, and a tornado. Plus, the Swarm Lord attacked the Santa Maria to prevent the heroes from reaching land, and he attacks Columbus in his temple. But, thankfully, Columbus manages to squish the swarm with a golden idol. Now that was both gross and awesome at the same time. And now, let's move on to my final words. Overall, The Magic Voyage isn't technically a quote-unquote good movie, but this is still a movie that holds a very special place in my heart as one of the few bad films that I grew up with. Yes, I am aware of its many flaws, like the writing, the animation errors, and the ad-libbing. Not only that, but the story is a tad rushed. Some characters, like the rats, are out of place, and there are some numerous plot holes. But on the positive side, some of the songs were okay, and there were some humorous and entertaining moments. And I admit that I did like several characters like Columbus, Bob, Marilyn, and even Pico. Plus, the Swarm Lord was a very threatening character. Lastly, I feel like this movie is a pretty harmless one to show to your children. So, my personal rating for this movie will be a 55% out of 100. Yes, it's not exactly a good movie, but I can watch it more than once if I want. Well, that's it for today. Be sure to tune in again next time, where we look into one of the rare good live-action films based on a Japanese anime, Mustang Power.